All right. So as a sociologist, we usually look at how a society works, the structure, the dynamics, and the composition and characteristic of a society. And as a cultural sociologist, my specialty is to look at how culture plays a role in how society works. Culture is a very big word, I understand. But in general, that when we talk about, it's very my interpretation about culture is the way how we relate to things. It's about relationships, how we relate to one another, how we interpret our relationship with our room, with our things, materials, people, etc. And how this way of relating one another and the way we see it influence the way society works. So basically, that's my field. And so it's my pleasure to share with you my research. My PhD research is about this waste recycling in Taiwanese society, basically after its the post-authoritarian period, so to speak, so after the 70s. So I was just wondering all of us are in Taiwan at the moment, or someone is connecting from abroad? I'm just curious. Is someone else not in Taiwan? Silent no, then I guess. Okay, well then, yeah. So then I guess we all enjoy know Taiwanese society in our own ways. So I will kindly ask Anne to share the PowerPoint or PDF file. Oh, thanks. Taibat? Do I pronounce your name right? Thanks for your message.
Problem. It's Thibaut.
Thibaut.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the title I want to share with you today is Rethinking Recycling, and to talk about the social cultural relevance of waste. Can you do in next slides directly as well? Thank you. So when I talked to Anne about what I can share in Red Room Taipei in this ecological session, and told me that it would be nice if people would like to know how waste and recycling, how can we as every individual to contribute to battle with the difficulty of waste brought to our societies. But then I kindly asked Anne to give me another opportunity to tackle this question from another perspective, exactly not from an environmental perspective, but from a cultural and social. Because the thing is, for me, when we think about waste as just like the image that showed in the for this event, the event page on Facebook, we choose this the stereotypical image of waste that is a bulky pile of unrecognizable materials that pile together, right? That's just like the image now we see on the slide. So this is a way how we usually approach waste. It's a problem that is very alienated. It symbolizes problem of society that needs to be dealt with, that needs to be eradicated, so to speak. But in this problematization of waste, waste can only be bad, so to speak, that if it makes us feel bad. When we look at this, we're like, oh no, ooh, it's polluting, it's a problem, and no solution comes up, proper solution comes up yet. But the thing is, in this framework of imagining the social relevance of waste comes with negative consequences of discarded materials. It's only bad. And what problem of this problematization of waste is that it leads to an unintended consequence that usually people start to feel, well, what I would say like moral fatigue, like constantly dealing with talking about waste, and but come to a point that you will meet definitely one of your friends will say, well, you know, the world is doomed, so I cannot do anything about it. So this overburdened feeling leads to inaction because it's impossible for me as an individual to deal with it. And also in a way that we make waste as something very abstract idea that it becomes really alienated. It's not something that now we see in the picture. That's nothing to do with everyday life, but that is the things that appeared in our living rooms actually. So this is a way of alienation when we problematize waste. So over the last decade, so to speak, and can you do the next slide, please? That there's this group of scholars that gathered together. They call it, or we call it ourselves as members of discard studies, so that we kind of move the waste as what I wrote here as self-evident category to waste as a social construction. So in a way that scholars, or especially from social science or humanities, there's also including artists, architect, all from different backgrounds that come to try to reapproach waste, that we want to understand our relationship with waste and the system behind it. So it denormalize the taken for grantedness of discards, that we began to see those things, waste, as a social process. It's a phenomenon, a very modern contemporary phenomenon, and waste or discarding is a way of life. It's a claim as well as it's a category. Basically, waste is a category. So it's a metaphor that, well, in Chinese we sometimes will call a person that's like useless as a fei wu, right? It's valueless. So instead of thinking waste as this abstract problem that waiting to be solved, scholars trying to understand that to look at the wider systems, the structures and the culture of waste and wasting. So instead of looking at behaviors only, we try to see the system behind it, that we consider that that is the structure that uphold norms and practice of waste and wasting as well. So that in a way that instead of thinking awareness is an like ideal method for creating changes around waste and wasting, that we talk about, you know, consciousness, green consciousness, aware of how the environment is changing. So when we aware of it, we will take an action, etc. We are not dismiss this kind of approach, but we want to say, let's look at bigger problems. Let's look at the infrastructure and the scale to scale up systems that are contributing to this social phenomenon of waste and wasting. So, and can you please do next slide? So for example, one of the concept that very fundamental and very first concept that we talk about is the scholar talk about is like the planned or perceived obsolescence. So it basically talk about how the structure, the industry purposefully to make products that meant for disposal. I mean, we're in Taiwan, the most direct example is the disposable utilities, right? The plastic bags, the footwears, etc. But there's also bigger than that. I mean, for example, the classic story or example of this is light bulb. So in the 1960s, when light bulb like doing the mass production, a light bulb is usually lasts for 2,500 hours. But then the whole problem is that makes the light bulb last too long, that the people won't buy it in a way that the industry consciously to reduce the lifespan of this product. To now it's average, if you go to the convenience store, you look at the lifespan of the light bulb is usually around 1,000. So, I mean, it's not, we cannot have it longer, but we planned it to make it obsolescence, that so we can continue to purchase. And of course, there's also another way of doing it. Instead of just really making the product crappier, we also have the entire culture of fashion and to make things less desirable. And then so although the clothes is still function, but it becomes a waste when it's not in fashion. So it's a perceived obsolescence, so to speak, that the whole culture and system forcing people to replace old products with new ones and then throw away old ones that is still useful. And can you please, next slide? Thank you. Then, but the thing is, usually scholars, or my previous generation of scholars, when they talk about this, and perhaps you also heard of this term before, that will describe our society as a throwaway society, and it's all basically the problems of consumer, because we don't use our object, our things long enough, proper enough. But here I want to challenge, personally, I really want to challenge this idea of blaming everything and putting all the responsibilities to individuals, because besides a consumer, we are also a person, we are also a producer, we are also a mother, we are also a dancer. We have multiple identities instead of consumer. And then throwing away is not really our problem when the structure is making it meant to throw away. So when I was thinking about those things, I really think it's a problem of affluent society, that it's also not just saying that, oh, we make problematic items, etc. It's also the point that we have too much. Everything is too much, because I am so busy with all the things that doing in my life that I will have no mind to think how to use a product that in a different way. So, for example, if my clothes is broken, I will have to have the idea how to deal with it. I have to make it useful in a different way, in a different role, in different identity as a material. So, but I don't have the time. God, there's just too many things. And then also a society that we are, as a global one, as well as in Taiwan, that it's just everything is too much. We produce too much, so that we need to throw away old ones to have a place for the new ones. We also consume too much in very typical way of all you can eat way of living. That I always remember that I think it was a few years ago, I went to Japan, and I think a lot of people, a lot of you most also enjoy going to supermarket when you travel abroad. I think it's always a way to look at how people live their lives, right? So I went to Japan, and then I check what they sell in those drugstores. So it's really interesting that there are two lines. One is for all the digestion medicines, and the other one is for all the energy drinks, all the vitamin B, vitamin C, etc., nutritions. So at that moment I was like, well, maybe we consume too much nutrition, too much food, too much energy that our body cannot digest, so that we also need those pills to help us digest. And then if we, as a lot of scholars also look at the national disease of a society that usually will have the heart problem because we eat too fat, etc. And then you have all this remedies to deal with those problems of consuming too much. Anyway, it's a sideline of thinking, but I hope you understand what I'm saying, that for me, it's instead of thinking it is an individual's problem to throw away, constantly throw away, it's a time to look at how a society we live that is so in a world that is too much, and we aim to have more, we aim to develop more, we aim to have more things happening. And then that leads to also a way of saying, as the culture of exhaustion, that we are exhausting ourselves, each other, and the material and the earth, the resources, because we think affluent as a positive term, as well as development and progress. So I will briefly pause here. As Anne earlier mentioned, that my speech is about like 3 sessions. So this is the first session that I invite you to think waste in a different term, that it's a way of understanding ourselves and our society, not as an environmental problem. And then next session, I will move back to the environmental, the setting of Taiwan, and then to think how this relates to Taiwan. And the third part is the case study of a religious group, the Buddhism-based organization, Tzu-chi. So is there anyone would like to share or have questions or any ideas that pops in your head when I was talking all these relatively more abstract ideas of seeing and thinking? Please do. It's always weird to look at the screen with a silence. No background. I was thinking that maybe I should play some music for my own. Or yeah, which one do
I will say something. I think it's very important and interesting to say that the word affluent is so positive, but that's the issue. And I think what keeps us going further into all our problems, it's everybody what's being saying for 30, 40 years already. In the 70s, they were saying, but we can't, in France, they would say, you can't fall in love with a growth, how to say, you know, the mathematic curve, yeah, with the growth curve. It's not something that should make you dream, because life is about so much, well, about other things. Well, life should be about something else than just looking at how much income and how many things we can buy. It should be about something else, yeah. So that's it. Affluent and growth. We always measure happiness and progress, looking at our growth, and still today in this summer 2021, where we have so many catastrophes, we're still, it's crazy. Like today I've read a new article about Taiwan that was saying, yeah, new growth of, I don't remember, like, oh yeah, production of sports items, yeah. But all in plastic, and what for? Just to show off. Most of the time, you could go do your hike in your normal pants, but no, people need to buy an extra appendage to show that they are great hikers. That's it. And really, I don't know why we don't talk about that much more in the newspapers and everywhere, because everybody knows what I'm saying is so obvious. Or maybe not to everyone, I don't know. So what can we do about that? How can we change? Just like the way every day people, normal people, well, we are all normal people, but I mean, like everyone on the street to meet and you can have that conversation that would say, oh yeah, affluence and growth, this is crap. But I think it's hard to have that kind of conversation on the street. How can we, I know you don't have magic solutions, but I'm a teacher. I try to import these things into my classes, and my kids know, so to say. So everybody knows, but we're not acting. So what's happening?
Yeah, maybe because it's too much.
Affluent,
not necessary. I think it's not even necessary only material in a material sense. I mean, thoughts, awareness and information, that's also come to a point that maybe it's too much. And that's what I was saying in the first point, that, you know, when there's too much, that becomes an abstract idea, just like waste. It makes people, and it comes with a moral connotation. It can contribute to a fatigue, right? Like, I mean, yes, I know the world sucks, but I mean, I just really want to have a bowl of cereal this morning, please. And it's also this inactive, I think it's already reflecting a way how we deal with it. The affluent, I mean, I use the word affluent, but I think the most the most easy way of saying it is just, damn, it's too much. And so I don't, personally, I don't encourage to blame people who don't have the awareness, the engagement. I think it's also self-protection. Yes. But for those who cares, I think, I mean, earlier I was just saying, forgot to say that I really thank Shadow to give me the invitation to introduce me to the Red Room so I can have this talk. But I mean, for example, what Shadow, she's doing in circular economy, is also systematically to look at the issue behind this perceived problem, that to see the system behind it and how we change the system in this way, that the idea of circular economy, the production and the ownership, etc., that we don't necessarily have to buy things, but we can just share things to have the ownership, in the sense that it's also trying to find a cure to the system that contributes to the problem, so say, instead of just to deal with the problem. And so I do think there's a way of doing, although it's time is not much, it's not on our side. But to come back to Anne, my point here is just to share the idea that sometimes it's too much to think problems, and then everyone has to make a change. To change what? It's always a problem. And but if you really want to have a magical solution, I really think comes to on personal level, that is, can we have a degrowth in our life? I mean, it's nice, lovely to gather together and organize this event, for example, but it also create extra works, right? So there needs to have a nice boundary for every person, and to a company, to a society, that draws a line that enough is enough. And we cannot have it all. We cannot be the hero to save the world, but we can take care of certain things and draw the scope, and then be to do our works in our expertise, etc. So, and I don't have a perfect answer, but it's just a way to share my thoughts on this. So,
yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Is there any other want to share their thoughts or the image that pops into your head when we were talking about all these?
Anyone?
Well, if not, well, then I will continue. It's always nice that I think always comes back if it really hits you. So please come let me know. So and can you please let's do the part 2, and then let's land in Taiwan to talk about this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I want to talk about recycling after all the talk about waste. So well, if we think about recycling, it's as if it's something new. So, but the thing is, recycling or reuse abandoned discards, abandoned materials is by no means a contemporary invention. For example, in the old days, I don't know, I think there are some native speakers in this room. If anyone knows the term night soil. I see Roma's nodding. Well, I don't. And then interestingly, I don't think it's, then I talked to a lot of young English native speakers. They also don't know the term night soil. So night soil is basically, how to put it delicately. Roma, can you help me with this? How can I put it elegantly?
Sorry, I guess the easiest way is to say that it's from septic tanks and excreta, I would say. Waste, human waste.
Human waste.
And animal waste.
And animal waste, yes. Well, okay. I would just say, I think it's easy way to say is it's human poop and animal poop. So it's done, it's the things that our body process, what it's put in and then it puts out. It's our human waste, exactly like Roma. Thank you very much. I should write it down. I will use it later. So the thing is for, oh, thank you, Rose. Okay, I will continue. I will come back to the message later. So night soil. So basically it's human waste. It's the most fundamental, the first waste, kind of waste that we need to deal with. And in the old days, there's this, every society has its own system of collecting night soil for agricultural fertilization. So if we talk about reuse abandoned materials, the waste, that is nothing new. And another example is actually rags. I really like this thing that I learned from my field work in Taiwan, is that in old days, we always have, every society has its own system of using old rags, so broken clothes. I talked to a lady in Taiwan. She lives in a Jiayi countryside during her childhood. So she's now like 60s, not particularly an old person, I would say. She told me that for her, it's always, as she remember, when it talks about recycling, she think of reuse waste materials, that she think of rags, that when she was young, she remember when the clothes are broken, she will immediately cut it into few pieces so that it will use as rags to clean the house. And when the rag is broken, that is just too dirty, etc., that she will use the scissor to cut into like lines and then weave it make it into a rope. And after the rope is broken, is no longer used, the family will collect it and then burn it, and then becomes ashes, and then you will use it in the farm. So the thing is, there's this system, a way of doing things, a system of continued life of materials, and then she remember it, and she knows exactly where it goes after every stage as a product. When a product no longer functions, it will turn into another product and will become something else as its material characteristics, right? And then it continue until there's dust to dust, back to earth. So this is an example that in the old days, there's also a system. But, and please, next slide. But then now we think of recycling, it's kind of thank you. It's a kind of new term, so to say. The term of recycling actually kind of start only from 1920s. It was used to be a technical term in the oil industry that they send this partial residues that back to the refining process, to the production process. And so it's a very new term, so to speak, that from the 20th century. And it was until 60s and 70s, it has this an anchor point, so to speak, in the recycling history, that this once a technical term has this new meaning in our affluent postmodern environmental era, that it becomes tinged with this economic, political, social, and environmental meanings. So in the old days, it was not like this. And there are a lot of interesting waste sources I can share with you and how it contributes to the building of our modern society, including very classic example in Peru of bird shit. I can perhaps send you the links later. It's too magnificent story that takes a long time to tell. But anyway, in this new way of approaching recycling is a political moral framework that the act of recycling is mostly portrayed as a kind of green consciousness. You know, it's like when I'm doing recycling, it's a way of showing my citizenship, right? It's how educated, self-aware. When I'm using this tone, I don't mean in a dismissive way, but it's just the way how a thing becomes like this with its cultural meaning in contemporary terms. But then the thing is, instead of thinking, when I talk about recycling, you think more in the environmental, green way, instead of economic politics, right? But now I'm going to tell you the story of Taiwanese recycling to tell you how this transfer. And please, next slide. So in Taiwan, if you know, okay, this is contemporary system, but I will tell a little bit back history in this. So the thing is, in old days, let's say before 1970s, in Taiwan, just like every agricultural society, there's this traditional scrap collection system that scrap collectors, they will go on street and collect different valuable resources, particularly paper, glass bottles, and metals. So these are the three things that relatively, paper is very fundamental. It's not something new, but it's very important and valuable resources. And then for the glass bottle and metals, they are relatively new modern products that so they're precious. Then we have the scrap collectors to collect it from the street, house by house, door by door. And then in Taiwan, it was until 1970s. That's a crucial point. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Taiwanese history, but at that time, first global history, that was time with oil crisis, right? So all the raw materials price go up. So things are getting more expensive. If you want to produce things, all the resources are getting more expensive. But then the thing is, in Taiwan, at that time, we just embrace the international role, the role of producing different commodities, particularly household commodities, as well as electronic components in the global market production chain. We are the producers, just next to Japan, and there's Taiwan starting to do that in the 60s and 70s. So, and also during the 70s, there's this national mega infrastructure development, the national 10th infrastructure development or buildings. It was 70. So basically we are in a position that we need to build and make a lot of things, but then the material, the resource, the raw materials are expensive. So recycling comes in, that people start to use old discarded materials and turn into raw materials in the process production. So in short that at the 70s in Taiwan, Taiwanese recycling system is already take off in a relatively early terms, but it's not for environment issues. It's for economic reasons. It's just like that. It's material. It's things to make things. So, but then during the 90s, as you probably know, that Taiwan that time turned into a affluent society in a way that the economic growth, and then people have more disposable incomes, and then people consume and they discard things. And then that time during the, I believe it's 90s, 98, Taiwan's waste production reached its peak, but there's no facility to deal with it. There's the landfill is packed, there's no enough incinerators, and then also at the time environmental awareness is already coming along, that people don't like incinerators, that the air pollution it caused. So at the time the Taiwanese society, the government decided go from the logic of disposal to the logic of diversions, so to the recycling, to make it to have the system that we see it to deal with all these waste, so to speak. So now is this system still works today at this moment? It's very, at that time was pioneering actually, that basically the government has this fund team, that it's a management board, that it will collect money from the producers and sellers, that they consider they are the ones should be paying responsible for all the mass waste that's lingering on the street. So they'll collect money from the producers, and then will give money to those who deal with it, so the collectors and the resourcifications. So it's called the 4-in-1 system. And then so producer give money to the government, and the government gives money to the waste workers. And then for the household, we provide the resources to the waste workers. They will classify it and then give back to the system to produce things. And can you please do the next? I'm just wondering how people here in the audience, in the room, how do you throw away your things? I mean, to whom you give your waste and recyclable items? Can you maybe perhaps write it in the chat? For example, do you have a recycling room in your community, or do you have give it to the municipal garbage truck, or is that individual recycler will come to your floor to collect the bags that you leave on by the door? Okay, so Shannon will chase the garbage truck. Okay, yeah, so now we see some people will go to the garbage truck, and then, oh, Tommy has also a very special way of dealing with it, to a truck once a month or less. Also someone has Eva has have a recycling room in the community. And then, your system is have an individual collector. Right. Okay. Also, Yeah, so also individual recyclers pick up trash of your building. Okay. And can you please share the slide? So the thing is, I want to say is that in Taiwan, even though garbage truck and recycling truck is very famous for Taiwan's waste management, there are multiple conduits of how waste travels. And so I know it's a little bit, ignore the right part. You see, there's the governmental conduit, and there are also the private business conduit. So for those who have a recycling room in your community and also have an individual recycler will collect your own trash, your system is the private conduits. And then for those use municipal conduit, you thought yours is governmental, yes, in the beginning, but later it also goes to the private system. That there are a lot of ways of so there are multiple ways of dividing things, because people know my study subject is recycling. I also always become the consultant of how to discard things. So you are also welcome to write down the things that you don't know how to deal with, if it's recyclable or not, in the chat box. But I can also give you I never have the good answer which one is recyclable or not, because in Taiwanese system, especially in the city areas, that it's often that we rely on the recyclers, that what's their capacity, and if they know someone, their buyer would like to buy those supposed to be recyclable, but they don't want to because they don't have the storage space. For example, one is the garbage truck, not the garbage truck, the trunk, the traveling trunk, those plastic PVC hard shell bags that it's also not, in principle, it's recyclable, right? You can remove the zippers, you can remove the inner layer, and then also the iron bar, then it becomes recyclable. But the thing is, the issue is whether or not the individual recyclers, including the municipal workers, they will help you to remove, to deconstruct this, to destruct the item to make it recyclable. So often it's like this. And another example is the disposable paper bowl that we usually have when we order things to take away. People think that's a paper, right? You usually, if you recycle it, you will place it in the paper bin. But the thing is, because why it's waterproof, why can contain soup, is because there's this plastic layer inside of the bowl, the paper bowl. So it's not a paper bowl, it's a paper/plastic bowl. So if you want to recycle it, you have to have a special technique to resolve it. And then for all these recyclers, there's only 1 to 2 factories that are able to process this. So the thing is, the question becomes whether or not your recyclers have the connection to sell this product to the right buyer, that who also can sell it to the factory that's specialized to process this. So there's this, in a way, what I was trying to say is that recycling is a system of destruction that constantly destruct what a product is and make it recyclable or not. It depends on who's the one who recycles, and whether or not he or she has the capacity, the storage room, the space to do this job, and if he or she's network is able to recycle this. So just like how a product reaches a consumer, it goes through the wholesaler, producer, wholesaler, and the retailer. They also reverse value chain of recycling. Okay. And can you go next? So here you see on this picture, we have the, on the left, it's the rag picker on the street that usually will collect materials that from shops or individual household. And you also have the community recycling room that usually will have the what we call the merchant valuer that come to deal with all these same separated, categorized recyclables. Just like on the right hand is the truckman. He is the one usually will go to the community recycling to deal with it, to collect and then to sell it to the resourcification factory. And can you do the next slide? So on the left, we also have the junk shop. That's also usually individual can sell their valuable discards to the shop, and then all of them will go into this on the right picture. That is the resourcification factory, and not all for the resourcification factories. They are also specialized different materials. Like this one is for paper, you have the one for material for plastic, and you also have the one for metals. So it's what I was trying to say, that when we think of recycling, we usually thought, well, it's a green, it's a production, but no, it's a system of material logistics. And then in the process, we deconstruct, we constantly separate it, that when the material that we put them together in the production chain. Okay. So another very interesting point is that I want to share with you here about Taiwanese recycling is that when we think of Taiwanese recycling or waste, we come in mind is the governmental garbage truck, right? With the music tune, it's very rememberable. But the thing is, actually about 80% of the household materials are processed by the private collectors. So for those who have individual recyclers to collect your waste in front of your house, and also the ones to go to the recycling room in your community, etc. So they are the ones that actually do the work. So who are they is also a question, but I will not have time to talk this today. So I will stop here. I'll give you a general idea of how Taiwanese recycling works. If you have any questions, or I saw there's some sharing in the chat. Or if you have any questions about how to recycle certain item, then you are also welcome to share. But I'm not sure I have the right answer for you.
Because I know it's recycling, doing recycling the right way, but what needs to happen is to get past overwhelming things. Need to be taken down to a lower level of just seeing things as material. And if we are actually engaged in food, never ever think that engaging with this thing has a material outcome, we have very little impetus or motivation, actually. And so, but when you start seeing everything really as material, you have a much clearer sense of which things you want to engage with, because you know which things can more easily go back and truly be taken up again, as opposed to spending lots and lots of energy doing all this work, which in the end, recycling is just a Band-Aid and not a solution. So I want to challenge that right away. So maybe you can talk. Recycling is transitional. It cannot be the solution.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm very much agree with you. I mean, I don't see it as a solution because for me, like I said from the beginning, that recycling is a material transaction. It's a logistic, it's economic. It's part of the whole production, right? So that's why in the earlier talk that I mentioned that for dealing with the too much materials, that's also needs to go back to the systems that behind the production, and then recycling is part of the production. It continues the loop. But on the other hand, I also do not think it's just a band-aid, because it becomes a band-aid when we think it's as a solution. But if it's just a part of the whole operation to have a flow of materials and the way of helping us to understand how we relate to materials, then it's not, yeah. Like the rack examples I gave earlier, I think that's the part when individuals knows how they relate to material. They see as a material that is textile, and what's the characteristics of textile, and then how it transits from one product to another. When its function as a product failed, then it has another role, and it has another role. So I think I'm with you when thinking about the relationship with materials. That's how I think we should learn more about materials, basically, in addition to the systematical change. Just it always strikes me, for most of us, we don't know the differences between plastics. I mean, it's one of the examples that we know very little about this material that we rely on everyday life. And if we can say that contemporary society is built on plastics, while Taiwanese society also very much have a close relationship with plastic. And then now if we only see it as a polluted items, then we forget what exactly it is and how awesome this material is. It's made from the ancient oil that we made out of this type of material that it can elast and then apply to different possibilities. And then it's very protective in a way that's light, it's everything, but we know very little about it. And we have very limited way of engage with it, that we use it as a disposable ones. It's very weird for me to think that we, as a society, use perhaps one of the strongest kind of material as a disposable item. It's very weird. And then we blame the material as something polluting, a problematic thing. I find it weird. But yeah.
I have another question. I must confess, I've actually worked with the government for decades, and so including the EPA. I worked on a lot of their early laws around recycling. There was a huge push at one time, and you used the word actually in your presentation, was resourcification.
Right.
And in Taiwan, resourcification has taken
Tammy,
absolutely...
we can't hear you anymore. Tammy, I think you have been interrupted.
Oh, Olivia, can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me now?
not particularly clearly, but I can hear you.
Okay, maybe it was my connection. Sorry.
I'm moving my mic closer to me, maybe hopefully helping. But yeah, maybe I have a good connection here because I'm on Wi-Fi. I'm not on mobile or anything.
I can hear her.
So resourcification in Taiwan, what happened is that in the process, absolutely great materials became amalgamized and then became not recyclable in their next life, basically. And this created lots and lots of, just there is no way to deal with this kind of resourcified material. So I would like to ask about that. You know, is that still happening? Is that still a major goal of recycling, is resourcification? And what does that actually mean in terms of Taiwan recycling?
I think it's, well, Shadow, if you're welcome to partake if you, that's, I think it's more your specialty. But for Taming, what I understand for resourcification is more the process to turning back to raw materials. So we consider it as, but then the thing is, in the process, it's always contained with other, tinged with other materials, dust, maybe you can say it. So in the process to, in the aim to, on an industrial level, to deal with so many amount of materials, then it has this residue or problems with turn it back to that usable materials that fits the standard as virgin materials. So I will not be able to answer your questions that what's their plan on this. I have very little knowledge on that, exactly what happening in the resourcification factories and then their expansions. But yeah, I think that's the ideas I have.
If I may add something, so let me confirm with Tammy. Does resourcification means that you turn those recycled material into the materials?
中文是资源化, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's broad.
很笼统.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So,
So my understanding, and because I have had some more direct, communication with the recycling departments and the EPA, is that it originally, I don't know what the status is now, that's actually why I'm asking. Originally, it was an attempt to just take up waste in any way that would make it reusable. So it was not an attempt to make it a raw material that could be reused and reused and reused, which is a very different thing. And so in so doing, creating new materials, okay, we supposedly reduce extraction, etc. Maybe, I mean, it depends on what the thing is, right? But also created a whole bunch of material that virtually, really, really, truly is untake-upable by any system. Okay, so that's the question. What's it like now?
So okay, so since I sit in a board of recycling funds, so I have access to some official statistics. I don't say that that's all correct, but that's the statistics that I get. So so the recycling rate in Taiwan is about 60%. So out of these 60% that's collected, about 80% that has been able to made into certain kind of material, not necessarily high value material, but I believe even road fuel is included. So 20% of the 60% go back into the incinerator because it's, for instance, people when they throw the recyclable goods and they mix, so then it's waste in the end. So that's, and then also residues. For instance, you have a PET bottles and then you have film around it, and then those become pretty much residue during the recycling process, what we call it processing process. So that's those 20%. Yeah, and then there are indeed and this and that projects to improve that. Yeah, but I think it does really need much more research to go really deep, because into each materials, and then to really check the factories and then learn about if there's any way that we can improve it. But Recycling Fund does have projects every year using about how much? So the Recycling Fund is about 6 billion Taiwanese dollar. And then there's a certain percentage that's dedicated to improve the quality of these resourcification. Yeah, so that's my answer to it. Yeah.
Can I have another question? Because we were recycling, right? Composting, Taiwan is still struggling with that. A very relatively small fraction of organic matter is actually composted, and they struggle with that. And partly it's a combination of collection, the type of material it is, the wetness of it, et cetera, and then where to use it, redistribute. Also add to that is because other wastes get in the organic matter, especially plastic. So even when it is turned into, fertilizer, a certain amount is still plastic. It's impossible. It's the same issue with the residues, right? So that I've seen firsthand. I can tell you it's something I deal with a lot. But yeah, those are to me major things, because these big systems actually magnify those problems. Yeah. So I would like to know what they're going to do about labels on fruit, for example, because that's every single piece of it's going into the compost.
I think, well, Shadow, please add if you have any comments or feedback on this. But to me, I think that's why I want to say that, of course, we can go all the details and problems that we deal with on the daily basis. But the fundamental issue here is that, like I said, recycling is a process of deconstruction, right? But then who is on the front line to deal with this decomposing, the separation, categorization? Well, it's individual, and you and me. And then if we have to understand that we are doing this in an economic or industrial process, then we are also have the responsibility and knowledge to deal with it. So then in the sense that we'll need to know that when we, even though we have all the card box that we ordered from online shopping, and then we thought we can recycle it, but not true, because it's always taped, it's with a lot of plastic wrapping around it, then it's our individual responsibility to separate it. But we don't have that much time and then space to categorize everything. So then we also give this to the other professionals nowadays, that is also individual recyclers. But who are they? Are they really being trained? Are they really knowing what's the idea of this? No, their motivation of engaging recycling is completely different from the household individuals that we are constantly thinking it's as environmental, but they're just a way of making living. So that's also the tricky part. And if that's it comes to a very economical reasoning to when they're doing things, if they have the time, they have the space to do all these works. If you then in Taiwan, or at least in Taipei, they are doing it at the street corners of separating things, etc. But it's really high risk for them to do it. There's no professionalized environment to do that. Of course, there are some systems do that usually becomes perhaps Shadow can add it on it, but then from what I understand, that then the resourcification as the producer in this chain of destruction, they are the upstream, right? So now they are building down all the way downstreams, that they are trying to specialize this process by also relying on technologies. But it's all very in the beginning. So I think you throw out a question that it tackles the fundamental issues I want to address here, that this is a work of separation, and then whose responsibility, and is it all the consumers? Are we only consumers, etc.? So yeah, so that's my quick feedback to share with your ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, well, and I will just too quick to say that I don't think we have enough time for the third part that I was planned to share on Tzu-chi and religion, because I think it's also another huge packaged information to share with it. And then I think if we want to finish the event by 9:30, I think we don't have time, but I think maybe we can save the time for the discussions if anyone have more questions and ideas, etc. What do you think?
Well, we have 20 minutes, so I think we're very interested in that third part. If you could still present it in 10 minutes, it would be great. Is it possible?
Yeah, of course. Okay.
So let's go over to the third part now and we'll see. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
No problem. Then can you please do the PowerPoint sharing? Okay, so I was just wondering if anyone knows Tzu-chi and waste recycling in the group. No, I saw some. All right. Well, I will briefly tell you about Tzu-chi. It's a kind of a case study that I have in my own research, that they're a Buddhism-based organization. They started around 60s, and now they're one of the biggest non-governmental organization in Taiwan. I think they have about 6 million members on a global scale. But then the thing is, they also engage in waste recycling since 90s. That they are a community-based recycling stations in different neighborhood, that they are also relying on almost 99.99% on volunteers to collect waste recycling from households and then separate them and then ship them to the recycling industry. So for me, like I was trying to share in this talk, is how to understand waste and recycling from a different perspective, right? As a problem that needs to be dealt with, and also how to, through waste, to understand a society. So then my question at the time was like, why all these old people would like to elderly people to engage in this kind of dirty work on a volunteering basis, and then to also where there are like about 6,000 community recycling stations across Taiwan. Why there are so many community recycling communities? And then they have been operated since 90, so it's already more than 3 decades. What is all this about? And then why this Buddhism-based organization would like to do this thing, in addition to its other philanthropic engagements like a hospital, and also they have the media, etc. So then the whole idea is why they are doing this, and who are they? And can you do the next? And can you please do the, oh, I think she froze. Well, okay, then I will continue anyway without the PowerPoint. And then, so the idea is to see, then I look at it. So the first one, who are they? So like I mentioned, that like the average age in Tzu-chi waste recycling are about 69 to 70s. So in this waste station, if we meet someone that is usually below 70s, then they will consider that this volunteer as a young person. And then, so the thing is, when I understand it, all these elderly people goes to recycling station is because actually when they are there, their labor destructing an item because something that they are familiar with when they were young. They are the ones that who make products. Like when they were 20s and 30s, Taiwan just had this, like I mentioned, during 60s and 70s. It was the time Taiwanese was in this mass production phase, that people will go have this family factory. They will compose all different materials that will sell abroad. And that time we're known for a made in Taiwan label, just like now we're familiar with the label of made in Vietnam or different Southeast Asian regions. At that time, Taiwan was the world factory, so to speak. So they are when these elderly people, when they're in their 20s and 30s, they're very familiar with this composing objects using their hand, and then to sit on a communal setting, on a squat, on a stool, and then to make things while chatting with one another. So this is something they are familiar with. And now look at the society now in Taiwan, that it becomes for them a very strange place. They're surrounded by technologies and all different way of living. So it's almost a strange land for them. So when they are retired, they want to make use of themselves, and they have that mentality that, a person's value comes from work. And then they don't understand the idea of retirement. They cannot do nothing at home. They think they are waiting to die. They really want to do things. They want to volunteer. They want to contribute. They want to find their personal value through this. Then, so they will choose the setting that is most familiar with them, that is in this communal setting, and then squatting on a stool and destructing and separating things that they used to put together. And then from this process, they feel their value as a person, their skills are also recycled together with these items. There's also like one of the mechanics I talked to in Tzu-chi recycling community. He usually go there like 2-3 times a week. And then he used to be a freelance mechanic that's fixing things. That he will say that, yeah, I mean, he will decompose all these engines, washing machines, or a blender, or a cooking pot. And I'll say, yeah, I know how to do these things. I used to put them together. And yeah, it's such a waste. I mean, this thing, just like he himself, he feel like he's being discarded by the society, that it's useless, but he knows that he still have things to contribute, just like the item that he's trying to recycle. So that's kind of the mentality that I find why and who are in Tzu-chi recycling communities. And then for why also the Tzu-chi community recycling as a social movement from the 90s is also very to do with the fact that I'm not sure if you know, Taiwan had a localization movement going on since the 90s and 2000s. At that time, Taiwan's trying to very much to find our society's identity, because the political democratization, right? We want to separate from our identity from Chinese. We are Taiwanese. And who is Taiwanese? What is Taiwanese? And then so a lot of this hometown literature going on, and then we trying to have this community development. And so every development needs money. So how can a community develop without money? Then where the money comes from. So they will go start to have recycling system going. They will collect waste and sell it, and all these monies contribute to the giving money to the I don't know, brochure they making for to talk about the old histories, local histories, and also having an event, etc. So Tzu-chi recycling is also parallel to this Taiwanese political process, that it tinged with it. It becomes it gives money. It's a system that not for environmental only, but it also economic activity, that community people will make money, and they will contribute to their political movement or localization movement, so to speak. And as for the Tzu-chi as a Buddhism organization, why would they want to do this? Well, for them, Buddhism is, for example, they will interpret recycling as material reincarnation. They will say, well, you know, just like how season goes, how life goes, material should also have its own circle. So it has this very religious interpretation of how waste and material and recycling goes. In this way, I think my interpretation is that it's a way of secularizing Buddhism, that it becomes more linked to the society, that it's not a distant religion, in a way that it rejuvenates religion in this process. And also in a way that it produced, like the way the organization trying to talk about our relationship with the environment, that they will, for example, saying that, oh, this polluted land as we are in today is because our mind is being polluted, that we're polluted by the greed and all these desires that humans should contain itself. So by doing recycling, removing those waste, that we're also removing our mind's pollution. So this is a relatively and more traditional worldview, so to speak, that in its organization's engagement in recycling, it also promotes this traditional worldview that it does not want to be eliminated in the process of modernity. So very brief and short talk on Tzu-chi waste recycling. So that's, I hope, explain a little bit. So anyone knows Tzu-chi waste recycling before this talk? Right. Well, yeah, they are also almost everywhere in the community. You can, depends on where you are, you can always ask around and then see. It's a very interesting place to look at. It's a group of silver hair people sitting there and then separating plastic bags, and while chatting where to go to find the good doctors and what their grandchildren are doing, and how to eat healthy, etc. And then complaining about young generations do not cherish materials as they old days do. It's quite a interesting place.
Yeah, I received a present from a friend, and she said it's a recycled product, but it looks totally just like a well-made hat. And she said it's made out of plastic bottles, and it's out of very high technology right now. Like, it's not common to make use of plastic bottle and recycle it and make it into such a valuable thing. So yeah, I'm really glad to realize that this organization is also well connected with technology and make it yeah, like making good use of plastic. Yeah, something that I learned from a friend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a listed company that associate with Tzu-chi, that they basically turn all the PET bottles they recycle and makes into a textile related products, right? Because now actually what we're wearing, most of them are plastic related clothes. Our clothes are plastics. And so it's also related to the fact that in Taiwan, one of the most influential industry is textile industry. It has to do with this industrial development since the 60s. So there are a lot of integrations and also professionals in this field that also joined Tzu-chi, and then to see how it worked out on a very non-governmental and civic society forms, so to speak. Yeah, but what I was trying to say is that for me, this is really interesting development, sounds very ideal, but to look deeper why it can be like this, it's on so many levels that for the individual who really do the works on a volunteering basis, what's the motivation for them? It's a sense of belongingness. It's a temporal, time-wise belongingness that they find, that sense of familiarity, so to speak. They don't, when I talk to them, of course, those elderly volunteers, they say, yeah, the earth is very important, so environmental protection is important. But when we talk better, then the source I get, the ideas I get, I see it's not really for the environment. For them, it's a self-redemption, so to speak. And for the communities, they also develop it also for the environmental protection or to deal with the waste issues. But for them, it's a way of making money to contribute to the localized development that they want to give children scholarship. They want to have money to make food for and providing to the elderly homeless people, etc. So that's also for their local development. And then for the organizational level, it's really for reviving an old religion and also an old traditional worldview. So all together in a very different interest that merged together has but packed as an environmental product or efforts or development. I think that's the tricky part of a society, right? That shared intersection of different interests.
Mm-hmm. And have you thought about like the young generation when they become old? Do you think that they'll carry on this tradition to deconstruct stuff and find value in it? I mean, do you find the new generation has their own unique motive, like participating into recycling or any like green activity? Yeah, that's my question.
Well, I think your question also have a great answer in itself. I do think, yeah, the young generation have their own very time-wise, its own contextualized motivations. Like what we already see around us, there are a lot of startups that green startups, right? They will have the clothes sharing, and then they will think of how to collect waste as a way of doing tourism, and for people to engage in circular economy activities, development, etc. So I mean, everyone partake for their own reasons, and the shared reason can be very much contextualized in our this time and place. So I do think it continues, perhaps not in Tzu-chi. I'm not sure how that will work out, but I think the wave always continues, right?
Thank you.
No problem. Pleasure.
Don't be shy. If you have questions, really don't hesitate. It's now and not never, but it's really the opportunity. No, really? Well, it's almost 9:30, so if we don't have any other questions, we'll come to the end of the presentation discussion. Olivia, do you want to say something more? I was disconnected. I hope it hasn't had any impact on your presentation. I'm not sure you could present everything you wanted in the slides because I just disappeared.
No problem. I just
Oh, do you want me to show something before we say goodbye? Shall I show the last slides of your PDF? Do you want me to?
Sure. I mean, I have a few charts that to share the idea that yeah, okay, I will use them for a wrap up then.
Right. Okay. So let's wrap up.
Can you do the next?
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say something? I had set the time for 9:30. In case it logs off, I just created a new link. You might want to use that instead, whoever is online, just in case. Just save that link, please, in case we get cut off. All right.
Okay. Yes. So, well, just let's do this slide only. This is a chart that's showing how industry changed with agricultural manufacture and service from 1950s to current day in Taiwan. And so you can see how within 5 decades that things, the agriculture only shrinks so little and then service develops. And all I want to say is that for this, we tell development in Taiwan and progress. But then the thing is, when we tell the word development progress in a very positive terms, that we always look into the future. And then the whole thing is that if we look around, we turn around and see all this development and progress is involved with change. So then we see what we left behind. Those people who used to be working as an agricultural industry, they were left behind, and where do they go and what do they do and how they deal with this social change. So, I mean, when we talk about waste, of course, we can go very technical terms to ask how to solve problems at the moment. But we also, it's nice to take a step back and then to see how the bigger picture is rolling. And in this rapid development that we constantly want to solve problems, and then we create change, and then all these change create discards. And then there's no place for those discards. Those who lose jobs, they will go to the waste to deal with their life living, etc., for example. So yeah, so I think that's the point I want to make, to understand waste from a different perspective, see how it involves a social change and how it leaves marks. It's as if that's the trait. Through looking at waste, we can trace how we change. So that's the closing line point. Yeah. So I will hand it over to Anne. I think I talk enough today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think it's essential to see what waste means from a social perspective. Would you leave a contact or something if people want to ask you more, or would you do that? Or if people want to ask you after tonight, how can they contact you?
No, sure, no problem. I will leave my emails here then. Very easy. It's just olivia.dung@gmail.
Okay, thank you very much. So I thank everyone for coming tonight. I didn't introduce the Red Room because I thought everybody knows the Red Room, but we want to continue that series on sustainable development issues in the future. So it was our second online event. And we'll see how it goes with the virus. We really hope to make it live again, but for now it's just or live again. Now we need to deal with the circumstances. So thank you so much, Olivia, for talking online, and hopefully we can meet in the real life.
Yes.
in a soon future. And so if nobody has anything to say anymore, I would say good night, and thanks to Roma. She hasn't spoken so much, but Roma is behind and really making sure everything works well. So thank you, Roma, so much. Thank you, Olivia, so much. And thank you to everyone. Roma is there, we can see her. Nice.
Thank you, Olivia, and thanks all who came and attended.
Great, so we will keep everybody informed about the next event, live or online. We are preparing it. Yeah. Okay, is that all? Shall we say goodbye, Roma? Nothing more to add? No, okay, good. So good night, everyone. I will close the meeting.
Thank you so
Night.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye.